Hey everyone, so I made a video the other day where I asked if you remembered a pivotal moment in your career where someone gave you advice or mentored you, and I asked this for a purpose. I have a moment that I remember so vividly that truly changed the trajectory of my career. It changed the way that I thought about EMS, how I wanted to be to my coworkers, to my patients, etc. It changed everything. So I really appreciate those who took the time to answer it. I did get quite a few messages with your stories and I so appreciate it. So I want to tell mine. Fast forward about 2 months into paramedic internship, the tones dropped for a cardiac arrest. And I'd had a lot of good calls that internship, but I hadn't had a cardiac arrest. So naturally, I'm feeling all the nerves. If you're a paramedic or paramedic student, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's time to show what you're made of. You're thinking intubation, you're thinking all of the ACLS protocol you need to remember, and just showing that you can be a leader on a cardiac arrest call. So just to preface this, we did not do our internship in the same town that we lived in. So this was kind of a new community. Ironically enough, I lived in this community until I was about 10 years old and we moved away. So I had some connections, but very few at this point. At this point, I was almost 30 years old and there was hardly any connections. So we get there, it's late at night. As I'm walking up to the house, I start to feel some weird sense of familiarity. And I look around the house and I instantly realize where I am. Let's just say I had been to this home before and had a connection to the people who lived in it. Instantly, I knew that I was most likely about to work a cardiac arrest call on somebody that I knew and had known for quite a while. So I told my preceptor, hey, I know this patient. As soon as I walked in, I recognized who it was. I said, hey, I know this patient. And he immediately was like, just get out. You know, you don't have to do this. Feeling like I had something to prove, being a paramedic intern, I worked the code. We end up getting ROSC, we end up taking the patient to the hospital. And unfortunately for the patient and the family, the hospital ended up calling it. It was a weird feeling because I wanted to avoid seeing the family. I know that sounds cowardly. That's how I felt. I didn't want to face the family. I felt so horrible for them. We go a different route in the hospital so that I don't have to face the family. Ugh, I cringe just even still thinking about it. And I know how it sounds, so if you need to roast me in the comments, I totally understand. Now we head back to the station, and usually on the way back to the station, I would make sure everything was cleaned, put up, and that way once we got to the station, we could restock with whatever we used. And of course, as everyone knows, after a cardiac arrest call, it's always major restock. So I don't do anything. I don't lift a finger all the way back to the fire department. I just didn't do anything. I just sat there. So we get back to the fire department. One of the medics opens the back doors in the truck hall and he looks at me and he says, what's going on? And you could tell looking at his face, he wanted to say, what have you been doing this whole time? I looked at him and I didn't really know what to say aside from, well, what happens now? And he looked at me and he said, why don't you come out? So I jump out of the ambulance and I go over to another area in the truck hall with the medic that had pulled me aside. And I see other medics jumping in the ambulance and starting to inventory things that they needed, to get and restock. And so I told the medic that had pulled me aside, no, I need to go help them. And he said, no, you don't. You're exactly where you need to be right now. So he asks me, what are you feeling right now? And without hesitation or even thinking about it, I say, I feel kind of like I'm floating. This doesn't feel real. And he said, that's okay. What you're describing right now and what you're feeling is called shock. And it's completely normal. Most people don't end up having to work on somebody that they know. And if they do, it's not a cardiac arrest. So he told me, that's okay that you feel bad for the family. You should. They just lost somebody that they love. He told me, this is probably not going to be the only time you feel this feeling that you're describing. If you have faith, lean on your faith during these times. And these are the times to go back to the station and talk to your coworkers. I never forgot this man's kindness, ever. It meant the world to me. He could have opened the back doors of that ambulance and said, are you gonna clean up? Get to work. He could have told me, really, you think that's bad? You should see X, Y, and Z. But he never said any of that to me. He pulled me aside. He showed me such compassion. And he told me that day, this will be the day that determines if this is what you actually want to do. This is baptism by fire. You're working a cardiac arrest on somebody you know and a family that you seem like you had a connection to. And he said, you're going to be a great provider. I know it. And unfortunately, God rest his soul, he's no longer with us, but he was so influential in the provider that I became and who I wanted to become. It gave me an example of who I wanted to become. I just so appreciated the compassion that he showed me. I never forgot it. And although it wasn't just one piece of advice, I took a lot of that with me because I knew that I always wanted to be involved in EMS education one day. And some of the best educators are the ones that are not saying, oh, give it 5 years and you'll want to be done with this career, or yeah, this career just sucks. The real leaders and the real educators are the ones that did what that man did that day, pulled me aside, showed me compassion, explained to me what it was that was going on within myself, and that it was completely okay. And just a little bit of background on this gentleman. He ended up passing about a year after I had finished my internship, but he always kept in contact. Foolishly, I thought, oh, he was just really nice to me. No, that man had an impact on so many people around him. When I went to his funeral, people just filled the stands of a local high school in celebration of his life. And it was really touching to see how many other lives that he touched. So there you go. There's my story.